Hello, I'm T. Maxwell Smith and welcome to myDSLR, the show that teaches you how to use your DSLR. That's the logo. This is DSLR 101, which is a beginner's guide to pro photography. In the last episode, we talked about aperture and f-stops, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about focus and blur. Okay? So, we know that for every single photo we're taking, we need to make an exposure. An exposure in photography is a balance of light and time. Now, whilst we've got this exposure balance going on of light and time, there is another delicate balance going on, and that is a balance of focus and blur. So, I'm going to set the record straight on something, and that is, if there is something in a photo that is out of focus, that is not blur. Okay? Blur is the movement of light. As I said in the shutter speed episode, having the shutter door open can help you catch the movement of light. Okay? Blur is caused by something moving whilst the shutter is open. Whereas something that is out of focus, light that is not correctly focused through your lens, is called bokeh. I'm going to demonstrate this hopefully very simple. Now, if I move my hand, it should be blurry. But it is in focus, whereas if I put us out of focus, I am now bokeh. So to backtrack just a moment, I did say that we're talking about a balance of focus and blur. Now that's not actually correct. The balance is bokeh and blur. Now we know that a balance of light and time is called exposure. Not that sort of exposure. But our balance of bokeh and blur is also called exposure. And yes, it is the exact same type of exposure. It is the exact same balance. But why bring it up if it's exactly the same? And that is because when you look at a photo, you don't see light and time. You see bokeh and blur. These are the effects of light and time. They're actually aesthetic qualities that you can see. And they are a balance. If you want a lot of bokeh, you need to sacrifice time. If you want a lot of blur, then you need to sacrifice bokeh. Now, if you want a lot or a little of both, then you need to actually change the amount of light that your camera needs. And that is done with the ISO. Whoa, stop just a moment. We're going to take it back a second and we're going to take a closer look at those last 3 photos. So, bring up that first photo. Excellent. So our first photo is a sunrise over a castle wall. The shutter was open for 25 seconds, so I needed to have a tripod. And as you see, the result is very little bokeh. Almost everything is in focus. But some of those clouds are blurry because they moved within that 25 seconds that the shutter was open for. Now, if we take a look at the next photo, it has a lot of bokeh. The shutter was open for less than a 300th of a second. So I didn't need to use a tripod, and yet there is still no movement of light. Now, on the last photo, this is a car that is moving. Now, the movement is actually emphasized by the motion blur in the background. To achieve this, I needed to pan the camera with the car to minimize the movement and therefore motion blur of the car itself while maximizing the movement of the background. Okay, to sum up what we need to remember, light that is not focused correctly is called bokeh. And your actual exposure, the balance of your exposure, is dictated by how you want your photo to look. If you want motion, you need to sacrifice bokeh. If you want a shallow depth of field, you need to sacrifice time. So even if you've been watching all of my videos so far on exposure, the whole exposure balance is a little bit complicated. But in the next video that I put up, I'm going to talk about an amazing feature that your camera has that makes exposure simple. Okay? So if you want to see that video and you want to see more, let me know by clicking the subscribe button. That lets me know you want to see more. And in this episode, I talked about bokeh. Now, I want to know that I'm explaining things right. So if you've understood bokeh from how I've explained it, click the thumbs up button if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're on Facebook, click the share button. That's a way that you can let me know that I'm getting it right, that I'm explaining it so you understand. Okay?